The charade begins. Julian Blackwood stared at his reflection in the employee locker room mirror, barely recognizing himself in the gardener's uniform. The khaki pants and simple green polo with the Amalfi Cliff Resort logo felt foreign against his skin, accustomed as it was to bespoke Italian suits. His normally styled dark hair fell loosely across his forehead. 3 days' worth of stubble covered his jawline, the perfect disguise. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, adjusting the name tag that read Daniel. But something in him couldn't resist the impulse that had struck during this morning's executive meeting. When his hotel manager mentioned staffing concerns for the upcoming Costello-Kane wedding, the social event of the season, Julian had suddenly volunteered to personally oversee operations, though not in the way his confused executive team imagined. At 36, Julian had built Nebula Technologies. From his college dorm room into a multi-billion-dollar empire, recently adding luxury resorts to his portfolio, the Amalfi Cliff Resort was his crown jewel, a cliffside paradise in southern Italy that catered to the ultra-wealthy. Yet success had built walls around him, leaving him isolated within a fortress of wealth where authenticity seemed impossible to find. "Mr. Blackwood." His assistant's voice came through his earpiece. "The helicopter is waiting to take you to Rome for the investors' dinner. Tell them I've come down with something. Food poisoning reschedule." But Sir Julian removed the earpiece and tucked it into his locker. For the next 3 days, he wasn't Julian Blackwood, tech billionaire and resort owner. He was just Daniel, a gardener helping with the extravagant wedding between Hollywood heartthrob Richard Kane and fashion model Valentina Costello. Outside, the Mediterranean sun warmed his skin as he pushed a cart of potted lavender plants toward the ceremonial terrace. The resort hummed with pre-wedding activity staff arranging chairs beneath a canopy of fairy lights, florists constructing elaborate arrangements. "Those need to go by the stone staircase, not here," came a firm but frazzled voice. Julian turned to find a woman with honey-brown hair pulled into a practical bun, clipboard in hand, directing various staff members with the precision of an orchestra conductor. Her simple black dress was professional but unremarkable, except for the vibrant blue scarf that seemed to be her one concession to personal style. "The lavender was specifically requested for the ceremony arch," she continued, consulting her clipboard, not looking up. "The bride wants the fragrance when they exchange vows." "Sorry, I'm new," Julian said, adopting a slight regional accent. First day. The woman finally looked up, her amber eyes meeting his. Something in her expression shifted, not recognition, but a momentary softening. "I'm Sophia Bennett, the wedding planner." She offered a quick, professional smile. "Absolute chaos today, so I apologize for the tone. The celebrity wedding from hell has everyone on edge." "Daniel," he replied, gesturing to his name tag. "Just trying not to get fired on day one." She laughed. Genuine sound that seemed to surprise even her. "Well, Daniel, follow me, and I'll show you where these should go." As they walked, Julian noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way she scanned each area they passed with a critical eye. "Not a fan of celebrity weddings," he ventured. "Let's just say that when the bride has changed the flower arrangements 4 times in 3 days, and the groom's team is more concerned about paparazzi angles than actual marriage vows. It tests one's commitment to the job." She paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "I shouldn't be saying this to staff. Forget I mentioned it." "Your secret's safe with me," Julian replied, oddly touched by her candor. "I'm just here to plant things and disappear into the background." "Sometimes I wish I could do the same," Sophia murmured, almost to herself. Then resuming her professional demeanor, "The arch is just through here. The bride and groom arrive tomorrow for the rehearsal dinner, and everything needs to be perfect by then." As Julian arranged the potted plants were directed, he found himself observing Sophia with growing curiosity. There was something refreshingly direct about her, no pretense, no fawning, just focused competence with occasional glimpses of a more complex person beneath the professional exterior. For the first time in years, Julian felt a spark of genuine interest in another person. And as he continued his gardening charade throughout the afternoon, he found himself looking for opportunities to cross paths with the wedding planner, who seemed as out of place in this world of excess as he felt in his life of privilege. What had begun as an impulsive escape from his reality was becoming something else entirely, a chance encounter that would soon complicate everything. Unexpected connections. The rehearsal dinner transformed the resort's main terrace into a tableau of Mediterranean splendor. White linen tablecloths fluttered in the gentle evening breeze, crystal glasses caught the light of hundreds of candles, and the air smelled of salt, jasmine, and money lots of it. Julian, still disguised as Daniel the gardener, had been reassigned to help the understaffed service team. He moved methodically between tables, pouring expensive champagne for guests who barely acknowledged his existence. The invisibility was oddly liberating. From his peripheral view, he observed Sophia directing the event with quiet authority. She wore a simple black cocktail dress, still the consummate professional, but had let her honey-brown hair down, revealing soft waves that framed her face. The ever-present clipboard had been exchanged for a small tablet, which she consulted. Periodically, while smoothing over any potential crisis before guests could notice. "More champagne, please," requested a woman at table 3, not bothering to make eye contact. Julian recognized her as Valentina Costello's mother, former model, herself, who had engineered her daughter's rise to fashion stardom. "Of course, Signora," he replied, filling her glass with practiced precision. Across the terrace, the bride herself sat beside her Hollywood fiancé, Richard Kane. The actor kept one arm draped possessively around Valentina's slender shoulders. While he regaled their table with animated stories, his famous charisma on full display. Valentina smiled at appropriate intervals. Julian couldn't help noticing how her gaze frequently drifted toward the darkened coastline beyond the terrace, as though seeking escape. When dinner concluded and speeches began, Julian positioned himself near the service entrance. Sophia appeared beside him, momentarily retreating from the spotlight to coordinate the timing of the dessert course. "Everything's perfect," he offered quietly. She startled slightly, then recognized him. "Daniel." "Right. They've got you serving tonight. Apparently I'm a man of many talents," he smiled. "Well, I appreciate any staff who can actually follow instructions. That's surprisingly rare this weekend." She rubbed her temple, a gesture he was beginning to recognize as her tell for hidden stress. "The happy couple doesn't look particularly happy," Julian observed carefully. Sophia's professional mask slipped for just a moment. "Between us, this is the most manufactured romance I've ever worked on. Publicity team practically orchestrated the entire relationship after his last movie flopped. She's basically fulfilling her mother's ambitions." She caught herself. "God, I don't know why I'm telling you this. I never gossip about clients." "Maybe you needed someone safe to tell," Julian suggested. "One who doesn't matter in your world." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the space between them, a recognition, perhaps of two people playing parts that didn't quite fit. The moment was broken by commotion at the head table. Valentina had abruptly stood up during her future father-in-law's speech, mumbled an excuse, and was now making her way toward the kitchen, visibly distressed. "Duty calls," Sophia sighed, already moving to intercept the situation. Julian watched her go, feeling an unfamiliar tug of admiration. She moved through this artificial world with such genuine purpose. Later that night, unable to sleep in the small staff quarters, Julian wandered to the resort's cliffside garden. The moon cast silver light across the Mediterranean, creating a shimmering path on the dark water. He breathed deeply, savoring this rare moment of peace in a life that had become increasingly hollow despite its material abundance. "Beautiful, isn't it?" came a soft voice. He turned to find Sophia seated on a stone bench, her tablet finally absent, a glass of wine in her hand. "It reminds you that some things can't be bought or arranged, no matter how wealthy the client," Julian replied, gesturing toward the moonlit sea. "May I join you?" he asked after a moment. She nodded, shifting slightly to make room. "Couldn't sleep?" "Staff quarters aren't exactly the presidential suite," he said with a small smile. "I wouldn't know. They've put me in some converted office." "To save the actual rooms for wedding guests," she replied without self-pity. 5 years of building my event planning business, and I still feel like an outsider at these things." "You don't seem like you belong in their world," Julian observed. "Is that an insult or a compliment?" she asked, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. "Definitely a compliment," he assured her. You're the only real person I've met here, she studied. Him curiously. You're different too. Most resort staff don't quote poetry to the wedding planner. Julian realized his error, his natural speaking patterns betraying his education. I read a lot, he covered quickly. Their conversation flowed easily under the Italian stars. Moving from books to travel, from dreams deferred to small pleasures appreciated. Julian found himself sharing truths about his life while carefully avoiding specifics that might reveal his identity. For her part, Sophia spoke of growing up in a small town in Massachusetts, of studying art history before pragmatism led her to event planning, of the novel she still hoped to write someday. What about you, Daniel? What brought you to gardening at a luxury resort? Julian hesitated, then chose a version of the truth. I needed to remember what it feels like to create something with my hands, to work with living things instead of abstractions. To step outside the life I built and see if it still fits. And does it fit, she asked, her amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. Less and less, he admitted softly. But I'm not sure I know how to build a different one. When dawn began to lighten the sky, they realized they had talked through the night. As they reluctantly parted ways, Sophia to manage final preparations for the wedding day, Julian to maintain his gardener charade, something had fundamentally changed between them. In the span of one night, they had become confidants, perhaps even friends, each recognizing in the other a kindred spirit, searching for authenticity in a world that rewarded performance. What neither yet realized was that the wedding they were helping to create was about to unravel in ways no one could anticipate, forcing truths to the surface that would challenge everything. Revelations and choices the morning before the wedding brought chaos to the Amalfi Cliff Resort. Julian had just finished arranging potted olive trees along the reception entrance when his carefully constructed world began to collapse. Is that Eduardo Viga's helicopter? Staff member questioned, pointing to the sky where a sleek black aircraft approached. Julian froze. Eduardo Vega was his CFO and closest friend, the only person who might recognize him despite the disguise. Wasn't supposed to be here. He was managing Nebula Technologies during Julian's private retreat. I need to check something in the West Gardens, Julian muttered to his supervisor, quickly retreating from the helipad area. As he rounded the corner of the main building, he collided with Sophia, sending her tablet clattering to the marble floor. Daniel, I've been looking everywhere for you, she exclaimed, bending to retrieve her device. The florist delivered the wrong color peonies, and the bride is having a complete meltdown. I need every gardener to help salvage what we can from the resort grounds. I can't right now, Julian replied, distracted by the sound of the helicopter landing. Family emergency. I just need an hour. Sophia's expression hardened. An hour? The wedding is tomorrow, and I have a bride threatening to call everything off over flowers. There are no hours to spare. Before Julian could respond, a familiar voice called out from behind him. Julian Blackwood, is that you? He closed his eyes briefly, then turned to face Eduardo, who was staring at him with undisguised confusion. What the hell are you wearing? Why are you dressed as staff? The silence that followed was deafening. Julian could feel Sophia's eyes on him, the weight of her realization pressing between them like a physical force. Eduardo Julian finally managed. This isn't the best time, Julian Blackwood, Sophia interrupted, her voice unnaturally calm. As in the owner of this resort, that Julian Blackwood? Eduardo looked between them, comprehension dawning. Interrupting something? My apologies, but Julian, we have an urgent situation with the Singapore acquisition. The board called an emergency meeting. I'll meet you in my office in 10 minutes, Julian replied, not taking his eyes off Sophia, whose expression had transformed from shock to something harder to read, disappointment, perhaps, or betrayal. When Eduardo departed, the space between them seemed to expand infinitely. So Daniel the gardener was just what? A rich man's game? Some kind of social experiment? Sophia demanded, her professional composure cracking. It wasn't like that, Julian began, reaching for words that suddenly seemed inadequate. I needed to remember what it felt like to be just a person, not a portfolio. And I was what? Convenient entertainment. the authentic experience of talking to someone beneath your social station. Her voice was controlled, but trembling slightly.
Oh no, Sophia.
You were the first real conversation I've had in years, he said quietly. I never expected to meet someone like you. She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping. God, this is humiliating. I told you things, personal things, thinking you were someone safe to tell, he finished, echoing her words from the night before. I still am that person. No, you're not, she replied firmly. You're Julian Blackwood, tech billionaire, my client's host, and technically my employer for this event. There's nothing safe about that power dynamic. Before Julian could respond, a staff member hurried toward them. Hey, Ms. Bennett? The bride is asking for you. She's locked herself in the bridal suite and won't let anyone in. Sophia straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. We'll have to continue this never, she said to Julian, before turning sharply and walking. Away, left alone in the garden, Julian felt the full weight of his deception. What had begun as an impulsive escape had become something far more complicated and meaningful. For the first time, he regretted his wealth and position for what they might cost him. Meanwhile, behind the locked door of the bridal suite, Valentina Costello sat on the floor in her silk robe, wedding dress still hanging untouched. When Sophia entered using her master key, she found the model with reddened eyes and a resolute expression. I can't marry him, Valentina stated simply. Sophia sat beside her on the plush carpet. Is this about the flowers? 'Cause we can fix? That it's not about the damn flowers, Valentina interrupted. It's about marrying someone when we both know it's just for our careers. It's about my mother's ambitions and his publicist's strategy. There's nothing real between us and I can't do it anymore. As Sophia listened to the bride's confession, she couldn't help drawing parallels to her own situation, the unexpected connection she'd felt with Daniel. It's now revealed as an illusion constructed by a billionaire's whim. Both she and Valentina had been caught in narratives not entirely of their making. What do you want to do? Sophia finally asked. Valentina looked up, surprise flickering across her face. Perhaps the first time someone had asked her that question. Without an agenda? I want to call it off, she whispered, then more firmly. I need to call it off. As the implications of this decision cascaded through Sophia's mind, the professional fallout, the media circus, the logistical nightmare, she made a choice of her own. Then we'll figure it out, she said simply, taking Valentina's hand. Sure. Life is worth more than tomorrow's headlines. Across the resort, Julian stood in his office, once again clothed in an expensive suit that now felt like a costume. Eduardo briefed him on the Singapore crisis while Julian's thoughts remained with the gardener's uniform hanging in the staff locker room. And the woman who had seen him more clearly as Daniel than anyone had ever seen Julian Blackwood. The wedding day, chaos dawn broke over the Amalfi Coast with picture-perfect serenity that belied the storm brewing within the resort walls. By 9 a.m., news of Valentina's decision had spread through the wedding party, creating ripples of shock, outrage, and behind carefully closed doors. Relief from the groom who had his own reservations about their arranged union, Sophia stood in the center of the maelstrom, fielding calls from publicists, soothing angry parents, and redirecting staff who suddenly found themselves preparing for a cancellation rather than a celebration. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since sunrise, her professional reputation hanging by an increasingly frayed thread. What do you mean you can't refund the full amount? Valentina's mother shrieked into her phone. My daughter is devastated. This venue clearly brought bad energy to the relationship. Across the lobby, Richard Kane's manager was simultaneously spinning the narrative to entertainment reporters. Richard is heartbroken but supportive of Valentina's journey. He asks for privacy during this difficult time. Privacy was the last thing anyone would get, as paparazzi boats had already begun circling the coastal property. Like sharks sensing blood in the water, Julian observed it all from his office overlooking the main terrace. He had spent a sleepless night wrestling with his own deception and its consequences. The Singapore crisis had been resolved with a few phone calls, the privileges of power. But the damage he'd done to his unexpected connection with Sophia seemed irreparable. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Enter, he called, expecting Eduardo or his hotel manager. Instead, Sophia Bennett stood in his doorway, composed but visibly exhausted. Her practical black dress had returned, hair once again pulled back severely. Clipboard clutched like armor against her chest. "Mr. Blackwood," she began formally. "As the event planner responsible for the Costello-Kane wedding, I need to discuss the cancellation logistics and your resort's policies regarding the situation." The professional distance in her voice cut, deeper than any angry confrontation might have. "Please sit," Julian gestured to the chair across from his desk. When she remained standing, he sighed. "Sophia, can we talk about yesterday?" "I'm not here about yesterday," she replied coolly. "I'm here because there are 200 guests, 40 vendors, and a media circus that need managing." "What?" "Canceled her $5 million wedding with less than 24 hours' notice. And your resort's cancellation policy is about to destroy my business when they inevitably blame me for the financial losses." Julian leaned forward. "No one is going to hold you responsible. That's naive," she countered. "This is my third major celebrity wedding. The planners always take the fall. I've invested everything in my company, and after today, no high profile client will touch me." The vulnerability beneath her professional veneer was evident only in the slight tremor of her hands as she finally sat down. Placing a folder on his desk, "I've prepared alternative arrangements for all guests. Cancellation notices for vendors and security protocols for managing the press. All I need is your assurance that the resort won't penalize the clients for the full contract amount." Julian studied her with genuine admiration. Even facing professional ruin, she remained focused on solving the problem rather than assigning blame. "What if we didn't cancel?" he asked suddenly. Sophia stared at him. "The bride and groom aren't getting married. That generally precludes having a wedding." "I meant the event itself," Julian clarified, "an idea forming. What if we repurposed it? Hundreds of guests are already here. The food is prepared, the venue decorated. What if we turned it into a different kind of celebration?" "What are you suggesting?" "A charity gala," he replied, warming to the concept. "We announced that the couple has mutually decided to redirect their wedding funds to benefit," he thought quickly, "ocean conservation. The Amalfi Cliff Resort will match all gift amounts that would have gone to the couple. Guests still enjoy a beautiful event. The former couple looks generous rather than flaky, and you demonstrate extraordinary professional flexibility." Sophia's expression shifted from skepticism to cautious consideration. That ... might actually work. She paused. "But why would you do this?" "The resort would lose money." Julian met her gaze directly. "Because I owe you a truth, Sophia. The man you met in the garden, Daniel, he's the real me. Julian Blackwood is the costume I wear. And Daniel would like to make things right, if you'll let him." The professional mask slipped just slightly. "I don't know who you are anymore. I'm still figuring that out myself," he admitted. "But I'd like the chance to show you without pretense this time." Before she could respond, the door burst open and Eduardo rushed in. "Julian, we have a situation. The press is reporting that you personally interfered with the Costello-Kane relationship. Some staff member apparently leaked that you were disguised as a gardener secretly meeting with the bride." Sophia's eyes widened. "That's completely false. Valentina never even met him as Daniel." "Doesn't matter," Eduardo replied grimly. "The story's already running. Your stock is dropping as we speak." Julian closed his eyes briefly, the irony not lost on him. His harmless masquerade was being transformed into a scandalous narrative that threatened everything he'd built. To make a statement, he decided. Standing, we need to launch the charity gala idea immediately. As chaos continued to swirl around them, Julian and Sophia found themselves working side by side, their personal conflict temporarily set aside by the larger crisis. Throughout the day, they transformed the wedding into an impromptu conservation benefit, redirecting the media narrative with strategic precision by evening. Guests in formal attire mingled on the terrace that should have hosted a wedding reception. Valentina and Richard made brief, separate appearances, graciously endorsing the charitable pivot. The potential disaster had been transformed into a public relations triumph for everyone except Julian, who still faced whispers and speculative glances about his role in the wedding's collapse as the gala reached its peak. Sophia found Julian alone on the cliffside balcony where they had talked through the night just days earlier. "You didn't defend yourself," she observed, coming to stand beside him. "You let them think you interfered with the couple." Julian shrugged. It was easier than explaining the truth, and it gave the public a villain to focus on instead of judging Valentina. Sophia studied him in the moonlight. It's ... surprisingly. "Selfless. Not really," he replied. "My reputation will recover. The market has a short memory for anything that doesn't affect quarterly returns." They stood in silence, watching the moonlight on the water. "Thank you," Sophia finally said, "for saving the event. My business might actually survive this." "You did the hard part," Julian countered. "I just provided a venue and some money." Another silence, more comfortable than the last. "I still don't forgive you for lying to me," Sophia stated quietly. "I understand. But," she continued, "I might be willing to meet the real Julian Blackwood someday, once I figure out which version that is." She left him there. With those parting words, not a resolution, but perhaps a beginning. As Julian watched her walk away, he realized that his impulsive escape from reality had ultimately forced him to confront the most important question behind the wealth and power. Who was he really, and what did he truly want from his life? Truth and new beginnings. 6 months later, a small cafe in Barcelona hummed with mid-morning energy. Julian Blackwood sat at a corner table, dressed in simple linen trousers and a blue button-down shirt. No designer labels, no ostentatious watch. His appearance had changed, hair slightly longer, beard neatly trimmed, shoulders more relaxed than they had been in years. He checked his watch, an ordinary timepiece rather than the luxury brand he once favored, and returned to the book open. Before him, not a financial report or business proposal, but a novel he'd been meaning to read for years. The bell above the door chimed, and Julian looked up. Sophia Bennett entered, scanning the cafe until her eyes found his. She wore a casual sundress, patterned with wildflowers, her honey-brown hair loose around her shoulders, looking more like the woman from their moonlit conversation than the rigid professional he'd first encountered. She approached his table with measured steps. "You came," she observed, neither pleased nor displeased, simply stating a fact. "I said I would," Julian replied, standing to greet her. After the charity gala, they had parted ways without promises. The Blackwood wedding scandal had dominated entertainment news for weeks before fading into obscurity. Valentina had retreated to a quiet life in her native Italy, while Richard Kane had rebounded with a critically acclaimed indie film role. Sophia's event planning business had not only survived, but thrived. Her handling of the canceled wedding demonstrating a creativity that attracted new high-profile clients, and Julian had disappeared from public view till 3 days ago when an email arrived in Sophia's inbox. Barcelona, Af Miro, Thursday, 10 a.m. "If you're curious about who I've become." JBNOW, sitting across from each other. The weight of unspoken words hung between them. "You look different," Sophia finally offered. "I am different," he replied simply. "The scandal gave me an unexpected opportunity. When everyone thinks they know your worst secret, they stop looking for the real story." Julian's smile held a hint of his former confidence, tempered now with something gentler. "I stepped down as CEO of Nebula Technologies, transferred majority control of the company to a trust that funds education and environmental initiatives. Kept enough to live comfortably, but not excessively." Surprise flickered across Sophia's face. "That's not what I expected." "It turns out that pretending to be a gardener made me realize how much I missed creating something tangible," Julian continued. "I've bought a small vineyard about an hour from here. Nothing fancy, just enough land to learn the craft, to work with my hands again." "A billionaire tech mogul turned winemaker," Sophia mused. "Sounds like a reality show." "Former billionaire," he corrected. "And I'm not making wine for the market. I'm just learning for myself, for now." Sophia studied him, searching for signs of the deception she had encountered 6 months ago. Finding none, she asked the question that had brought her to Barcelona. "Why did you contact me?" Julian met her gaze directly. Because that night we talked under the stars was the most honest conversation I'd had in a decade. Decided to rebuild my life around what matters. You were part of that vision. He paused. And because I owed you the truth about who I really am, now that I finally know myself. And who is that? She challenged softly. Just a man trying to live authentically, he answered. No more masks, no more hiding behind wealth or power or false identities. Just me, with all my flaws and possibilities. He hesitated before adding, I don't expect anything from you, Sophia. I just wanted you to know that our conversation changed me, and I'm grateful for that. Sophia's expression softened slightly. I've changed too. After watching Valentina choose authenticity over expectation, I finally finished the novel I'd been talking about writing for years. Julian's face brightened. You did? That's wonderful. It's being published next spring, she continued. I still plan events, but I've become more selective about clients. Life's too short to build celebrations for relationships I don't believe in. They talked for hours, the initial awkwardness giving way to the same easy rhythm they had discovered that night on the cliff. Sophia shared stories of recent events she had planned smaller, more meaningful celebrations for couples who truly wanted to be together. Julian described his fumbling first attempts at vineyard management and the small community he was gradually becoming part of in rural Catalonia. As afternoon lights slanted through the cafe windows, their conversation reached a natural pause. Should go, Sophia said finally. My flight back to New York leaves tonight. Julian nodded, disappointment evident despite his effort to hide it. I understand. Thank you for coming. As she gathered her things, Sophia hesitated. There's a literary festival in Barcelona next month. I'll be back to speak on a panel about new authors. I'd like to hear you speak, Julian replied cautiously. Vineyard you mentioned, she continued, her tone deliberately casual. Does it have guest accommodations? A slow smile spread across Julian's face. It has a small cottage that needs renovation. Nothing fancy, but the view of the mountains is spectacular at sunrise. I've always been partial to sunrises, Sophia, said the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. They represent new beginnings. She left him with her contact information and a promise to be in touch about the festival dates, not a commitment, but an opening. As Julian watched her walk away, he felt none of the regret or loss that had marked their parting 6 months ago. Instead, there was quiet hope, the kind that grows from truth rather than expectation. The man who had once hidden behind wealth and pretense now stood in the simple clarity of his authentic self. And for the first time, that seemed like enough, not a disguise to be worn or a role to be played, but a life to be lived with purpose and perhaps someday to be shared. On the sidewalk outside, Sophia paused, looking back through the cafe window. At Julian, their eyes met briefly across the distance, acknowledging what both now understood, that sometimes the most valuable connections begin when all pretenses fall away, revealing the truth beneath the facade.